On behalf of the Mecklenburg County Bar, thank you for selecting this recorded seminar for your CLE credits. The Bar depends on and appreciates your support. While we always love to see you in person at the Bar and Foundation Center, we know that this replay can be a real convenience to you by saving you some travel time and expense. For information on how to get your CLE credits with an MCB replay or online course, head to our website at www.mecbarcle.org. We'd also love to hear from you on new ideas you may have for future CLE programs. Thanks again for supporting the Bar, and now enjoy this program.
Thank you very much. As I told you earlier, this is coming full circle for me because I practiced law in North Carolina from 1978 until 2004. Some of your older members may remember me. I was a partner in the firm of Robinson and Lawing and practiced with my father, Norwood Robinson, and my brother, Michael Robinson, who's now a judge. Unfortunately, or fortunately, in 2004, I was a AV rated attorney. I was winning large verdicts in trial work. I had just, in the end of May, I had just won a $1 million verdict in the Middle District of North Carolina, and should have, for all practical purposes, been, riding the good life. That was a total misconception. In May of 2004, I woke up and said, I just can't do this anymore. I was stressed out. I was exhausted. I was burned out. I could not even suit up and go into work. I was that distraught. And since that time, I quit practicing law and went on a journey to try to understand what had happened to me, because I'm a third generation trial lawyer. If there was ever anybody that was born to do this, I was born to be a trial lawyer. It was in my family, and certainly grew up with it in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And it was a surprise to everyone, including myself, that I had gotten to a state where I had it was literally a nervous breakdown. And since that time, I have been studying, I have been going around the world, I've been getting therapy, I have researched this down deep rabbit holes. And what I have come to understand is that this happens to everybody. I mean, this is now something that has reached epidemic proportions. We're in a perfect storm right now for stress and burnout because there's so much uncertainty. Everything is changing. We can't do the things that we've been trained to do. We have to come up with new ways of doing it. And so everybody has got that added level of stress that the practice of law doesn't have on normal days. And so I have come up with a program. I have talked to bar associations around the country, and literally have developed a program specifically for lawyers and other professionals who are under high stress, don't know what to do, and are starting to be exhausted. They're starting to feel sick. They're starting to wonder whether or not they can do this anymore. And I call that, and let me share my screen here. Call it Lawyer Lifeline. And that is what our topic is for today, is how to avoid burnout and turn that into and transform that into a happy, productive life. And of course, my phone is going off right now. So, such is life. And so the first thing I want to explain to you is there is life after burnout. I did quit practicing law in 2004, and go into alternative healing. I went into transformational coaching. I now hold certifications in a lot of different um, modalities and techniques into how to help with stress. And what I've done is put all this into a package called Lawyer Lifeline to help people who are feeling stressed and don't know what to do about it. So, what is your definition of success? I mean, the very first thing you have to decide is, why are you doing this? Why have you subjected to yourself to a very stressful profession? And my definition of success, and I invite all of you to think about what it is you're trying to accomplish. And I'm talking about every area of life. You want to feel abundance, you want to feel fullness, you want to feel satisfaction. And it signifies the opposite of lack, disappointment, emptiness, dissatisfactions, and those negative feelings that we tend to get when we're not getting what we want. You know, I always joke that life is what happens when we had something else planned. But what happens is that we enter into um, a career thinking that it's going to be one way. And what happens is we find out that it's something completely different. And that causes stress. Stress is what happens when we're not getting what we expect. And one of the things that I have found out is that uh, we all have a expectation of what we're going to accomplish, what kind of money we're going to make, what kind of clients we're going to have, what our job opportunities and what our job duties are going to be. And sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. Now, does that mean you've done something wrong? Or does that mean that you need some techniques, you need some strategies on how to deal with life when it doesn't come out as you plan it to happen? And so that's what I do. Here's a really burning question for a lot of lawyers, and that is, we all have aspects of our career, or many of us have aspects of our career that we just can't stand, whether it's the billing, whether it's dealing with unhappy clients, whether it's dealing with colleagues that are unpleasant, whether it's the long hours, whether it's the stress that it separation from our families, whether it's the stress and the toll that it takes on our health. Any of these could be things that we don't like about our career. And if we don't address that, we're going to run into trouble. So how do you define burnout? You know, one of the things that I had to discover is what in the world was happening to me in 2004 that made me have a breakdown. And so one of the easiest definitions that I found is it's simply exhaustion. It's mental, emotional, or physical exhaustion caused by the stress that results in decreased work performance and satisfaction. It's when you aren't accomplishing what you want to accomplish, when your health is starting to decrease. We'll get into this in a minute, but the stress has an effect on our health that we had better pay attention to, or it's going to have disastrous consequences. I'm sure that many of you know this already, but the trends are not good. Uh, Psychologists will tell you that depression in the general population is 10 times higher now than it was in 1960. That's not a good situation. 40% of attorneys have reported stress as being a problem. 40% or more of attorneys have experienced episodes of depression. Now, as an aside, I will say there's a difference between clinical depression and just episodic depression. Sometimes we're in circumstances that are overwhelming, and depression is the normal response that our body has to threat and trauma. That's can be something that motivates us to overcome that, or it can be something that is destructive. And then the famous Hazleton ABA survey in 2016 came up with the startling statistics that 26% of us have substance abuse issues. And now I think the term of art is substance use events. So the thing is that that survey was actually followed up by another survey, which indicated that the number of attorneys with substance abuse issues is much higher, and it's not getting any better. I have worked with a lot of bar associations, and what we're seeing is that the statistics are not getting better; they're getting worse. And I think that is a sign of the times that we're dealing with, between the pandemic, politics, the polarization of our country, the stresses that the epidemic has had on practicing law. All are contributing to much higher functions or problems than we've ever had to face before. Now, let me go through the list of the stages of burnout, and you can determine whether or not you're on any of these problems or not. Hopefully, you can all say this will not that it applies to yourself, but perhaps you may know somebody that is experiencing this. The first thing we experience is the honeymoon phase, where we're really excited, we're motivated. We'll do anything and everything to practice law, to make our career, to make our place in the world. And we have unlimited energy and creativity, and even a compulsion to prove ourselves. That's those associate years when we're willing to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to make partner, or to achieve a status or a goal, a position in a law firm, or just to, if we're a sole practitioner, that we carve ourselves a niche in society to where we know we have steady clientele and we know what we're doing. And then all of a sudden we realize that we have an inability to stop focusing on work. That's all we think about. We think about our clients. We think about our work schedule. We think about our work productivity. We think about our success. And we stop thinking about ourselves. We stop thinking about our families. We've entered into kind of a social contract that we're going to sacrifice our lives and our families to this jealous mistress called the law. And the problem with it is that is so unhealthy in so many ways, but we don't even realize what we're doing. We're just trying to establish a career and make a minimal amount of money. But then we start to neglect our needs. We stop sleeping. We don't eat properly, and we start to isolate. The only people we talk to are our colleagues, or perhaps our wives or husbands, and our partners. And it's difficult to see the change that is coming over us. Perhaps our family and friends can see this, but as far as looking in the mirror, it's the same us. Then it gets even worse. There is conflict, what is called conflict attachment. We deny we have a problem. We have constant stress, and we perhaps may even feel a little panicky. Perhaps our income isn't what it needs to be. Maybe we don't have the clients that we need, and we start to panic. I've represented several lawyers before the North Carolina Bar Association who went into their trust accounts because they didn't have the income to pay their bills. And so we all know that's a big no-no, but in the heat of the moment, sometimes we rationalize doing things that we wouldn't ordinarily do. we start to reorder values where our work is the only focus. Everything that ordinarily would be just as important as work, such as health, relationships, relaxation, free time, are sacrificed. We don't have the time for that. We have this big case coming up, or we have a big meeting that we have to prepare for. These kinds of things are expected. We see this all the time with the people who want to succeed, is they sacrifice their personal lives in order to get that job, that partnership, that position, that client, whatever it is that they're striving to achieve. They sacrifice anything and everything that's really important. That's when we start self-medicating. We possibly start using drugs and alcohol. Families and our friends are starting to complain or feel our angst, and we start to lose our sense of value. We start to lose our self-respect because we're waking up hungover, or because we had one too many the night before, or perhaps again and again and again. And our relationship with our colleagues, our relationships with our family and friends, and our relationships with our clients begins to suffer. That's when the stuff hits the fan. We are exhausted, we have insomnia, we can't figure out what we want to do, life becomes meaningless, daily life is purposeless, or we're just going through the motions. Something's got to change, but we don't know what it is. And then what happened to me, the mental, emotional, and physical collapse. And perhaps you know somebody that's on that downward spiral. Perhaps you're on that downward spiral, but there is an answer. Burnout questions. On a scale of 1 to 10, how burnout are you? 1 being, I'm just feeling a little stressed. 10 being, I'm looking for a new job. I can't do this. I don't want to get out of bed. Where are you on that continuum? Next question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much time do you spend worrying about work? I know I was thinking about work 24/7. And one of the things that we think about a lot of times is, if you're a trial attorney, is when you're planning out, you're visualizing how a trial will go or how a hearing will go. You think of all the things that can go wrong. And one of the things that we start doing is worst possible case scenario. And that is a negative way of thinking that will cause problems in our personal life, in our physical life. If all we're doing, and quite frankly, I'm somewhat OCD, that made me a great trial attorney. But when you start focusing on negative things, that transitions into your personal life as well, because you start thinking of all the things that could go wrong with your personality, with your intimate partners. You start thinking about all the things that could go wrong with your relationships with your children. You start wondering or worrying about what could go wrong with everything in your life. Rather than thinking about all the things that are going right, you focus on what could go wrong, which is totally irrational, but it's very common. On a scale, and here's a personal question that I think some of us can relate to. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you self-medicate? Are you drinking every day? Are you drinking every week? Are you drinking every month? Or what? How often are we drinking? Are we taking medication for depression? Are we taking medication for anxiety? Have we even gone to a doctor about depression and anxiety? All of these things fit into the scale or measurement of, are we fit as a fiddle? Are we healthy as a horse? Or are we on a downward spiral where we may be talking to the LAP before too long. On a scale of 1 to 10, how often do you think about quitting your job? Are you think about it rarely? Have you never thought about it? Have you thought about quitting every day? That could be a clue that you're approaching burnout. Now, let me give you some information about what causes burnout. Now, we know what burnout is and what it looks like. There are reasons why some people burn out and some people don't. It may be a surprise to you to know that burnout is actually a survival mechanism that our body has to perceive threat, and that it is natural for people to burn out if they don't have any strategies or ways of dealing with the stress and anxiety that we experience on our day-to-day job. So the first one is predisposition. What does that mean? Attorneys are highly motivated people driven to achieve justice for others as well as make a living. Why did you become an attorney? A psychiatrist who I'm very good friends with tells me that a lot of people become attorneys because they've witnessed an injustice in their life. And that has seeped into their subconscious to the extent that they want to do something about it. And so what they're doing is that they've perceived something that's wrong with the world and they want to fix it. A truly admirable trait. Many people have witnessed something in their past that they have perceived as wrong or unjust, which they wish to correct. Again, wanting to right a wrong is an admirable trait. Some people just perceive that the world needs changing. It needs help. We're farting around. We're not doing enough. And so they feel a mission to go change the world. And then there's the white knight syndrome, which is an actual thing. And that is, I want to go charge into battle and fix everything, whether it needs fixing or not. They perceive that becoming a lawyer is their way of saving the world. I mean, we all know that the practice of law is like battle. In fact, it is the society's evolution of how to resolve conflicts without weapons. And so the problem with it is we haven't progressed very far since then. We're all motivated by a desire to help. And the problem is that defensive mechanisms, which normally help in most situations, do not help us when we're charging into battle. We're predisposed to look for problems. And that can be a problem for burnout because we get into situations that are not healthy because we're trying to fix something. We're trying to help somebody. There's nothing that feels more admirable than staying up all night on a case that you really feel your client needs you. The problem with it is that is a common contributor to burnout. Now, the next cause of burnout is trauma. The drive for justice is caused by childhood trauma or abuse, whether it's either suffered or witnessed. Unresolved trauma often results in burnout, even if you're doing everything right, because it's secondary trauma. Now, if something terrible has happened to you and you've become a lawyer to make sure that that never happens to anybody else, then you've got a huge burden to carry. Because not only are you trying to heal yourself, you're trying to heal everybody else. And if you're not properly trained for that, you're going to become overwhelmed. Conversely, if you are witnessing secondary trauma every day, look at it like you're a military officer or you're a first responder who sees trauma and tragedy every day. Are you equipped to deal with that? Have you been trained to deal with the horrible tragedies that you may witness from time to time? If you've had anything to do with med mal or personal injury actions, you've probably seen things that are horrible and are gut wrenching. How have you dealt with that? Do you think about, are you exposed to that every day? You know, the problem with first responders and military is we all know they get PTSD. We all know that they become overwhelmed with trauma. We all know that they burned out, but we don't all the time think about that happening to us as attorneys who witness horrible things on a daily basis. Now, if you're in the middle of all of that, I hope that you have a strategy of dealing with it. If you don't, one of the possible outcomes is burnout. If you're repeatedly exposed to traumatic events, that can lead to traumatic exposure response. Now, that also is a real thing. It's recognized in psychology as something that where we transform what is ordinary and commonplace into a negative experience, a negative perception. And when we're experiencing suffering long-term or short-term, sometimes we can look for that everywhere. The term of art these days is vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, PTSD, and burnout. So if you've been practicing law for a long time and you've been dealing with people that have been injured or suffered terrible tragedy, you may want to pay attention to this because you may be somehow putting up walls. You may be in denial. You may be saying, oh, that doesn't bother me at all. But at the same time, you have a feeling in the pit of your stomach that just won't go away. Now, one thing I want to throw in here is that it may not be debilitating you, but you may want to check on your staff. You may want to check on your paralegals and make sure they're dealing with all of this tragedy and stress and horrible events that your clients have experienced. Because one of the things we're starting to see is that, you know, staff are burning out as well. They're quitting because they can't handle, they don't have any strategies on dealing with what's happening to the clients. If they're dealing with a lot of medical injuries, if they're talking to people, especially in the divorce realm, if you're a divorce lawyer, I hope you're paying attention to all this, because the tragedies that happen in divorces not only can affect the lawyers, it can affect the staff as well. We suffer traumatic exposure response because we care. And I think that it's admirable that we care so much. However, if we're not equipped to deal with it, then we're going to suffer. Our quality of life is going to suffer. Our happiness is going to suffer. Let me just put up a chart on what to look for to see if you're suffering from any of the signs of traumatic exposure. Exhaustion, tension, insomnia, headaches. You get sick, constant aches and pains, inappropriate emotions, irrational fear, anger, and that's rage, helplessness, feelings of resentment or bitterness, substance use disorders, toxic workplaces, negativity, you miss work, you disassociate or feel numb, you can't get any satisfaction out of what you're doing anymore. You have not, conversely, you can also feel super important and don't feel like anybody else can do what you're doing. You avoid your clients because you may be having a bad day. You have difficulty in making decisions. You become overly cynical, forgetful, negative, problems in your relationships. In isolation, all you do is stay in your office all day and nobody's seen you in a month. Another cause of burnout is perfectionism. We're trained to strive for excellence. I mean, the worst lawyer in the bunch made good grades in high school. They were successful in college. They graduated from law school and they passed the bar exam. You know, I can't tell you, having been out of the legal world for 17 years, that's incredible. We're all amazing success stories, but because of the environment, because of the stress and anxiety that's caused by the career, we don't feel that way. The line between a healthy desire for excellence and unhealthy perfectionism is how you feel about it. There's actually a term for it, achyphobia, which is the fear of failure. And you can be 100% successful and still feel like a failure. And I'd be willing to bet statistically, some of you out there know exactly what I'm talking about. There's the imposter syndrome, where if people really knew you, they wouldn't be impressed. Or if they really knew you, they wouldn't like you. We get rigid. We have to be right. One of the questions I ask all of my clients, even when I was a lawyer doing divorce work, was, would you rather be happy or right? And fortunately, when I was a lawyer, most of them wanted to be right. Unfortunately, when lawyers have to be right on things that don't have to do with representing their client, this causes burnout. We can be our own worst critic. We have an inability to let people help us or to ask for help. And then we suffer from what I call overthinking disorder, compulsive thinking, where we just can't stop thinking. We can't turn our brain off. We are sitting there thinking over and over and over again about one little problem. I call that pole vaulting over mouse turds, but it's a real thing where we worry and we worry and we worry with no relief in sight. Finally, our inner critic, which I just mentioned. We learn our inner critic, we install our inner critic at an early age. Whether it's parents who wanted us to do better, or it was our siblings who were overly critical, or our friends that were overly critical, or our professors that were overly critical, we all learned that our secrets. We all know that we'll never be good enough. We will find anything and everything to criticize ourselves about. We're unforgiving, it's exhausting, it's irrational, and it's an internalization of everything we've ever heard. So, one of the things that you may want to look at is our cortisol levels. One of the first things that I would recommend if you are suffering any stress or anxiety is go get a blood test and measure your adrenaline, measure your cortisol, measure your hormones, because this could also be a problem contributing to your burnout. If you've got a hypoactive thyroid or hypoactive thyroid, this can be a problem because our natural body response to perceived threat is adrenaline and cortisol. And if we are creating irrational threats, or if we're envisioning threats that aren't there, it's because we're in a cortisol cycle, we're in an adrenaline cycle, and we can't stop it. And the way to tell if we're doing that is we've gained weight or obese, we have our infections won't heal, we have bruises, we may have acne, we have headaches, we have severe fatigue and weakness, we have depression, anxiety, and irritability, we have high blood pressure. I hope you guys are checking that. Digestive issues, mood swings, and sleep disorders. All of these are the physical, natural responses our body has to perceived threat. You know, we may not realize it, but some of us might actually be addicted to stress because of the rush we get when we get that adrenaline rush. It's that rush we get when we are cortisol. When we become addicted to our stress hormones, we will find ways to create them. We will make stuff up, and we will continue the stress long after the reasons for it have gone. I like to think of this as thought control, because science tells us that positive thinking creates neurochemicals such as dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins, and we all know how good that feels. But negative thinking creates adrenaline and cortisol, which is addictive in and of itself, and we will look for that. Albert Einstein said we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking that we used when we created it. That's why we can't heal ourselves of burnout. Let me go quickly through this because we're starting to run out of time, but there are real consequences for not paying attention to this. And so I'm going to go through a couple of the rules of ethics that bear on this, and you can just make a note of this and look at it later. Rule 1.1, we should not take legal matters that we know we're not competent to handle. Well, what if that includes we are stressed and burnt out, that we're not competent to handle them because we are emotionally, mentally, and physically exhausted? Diligence. A lawyer shall act with reasonable diligence and promptness. We all know that one. But what if we're avoiding clients because we have these syndromes, that we have TER? What if we're avoiding our colleagues? Would this be applicable? We have requirements that we have to withdraw when our physical or mental condition materially impairs the lawyer's ability to represent the client. You know, that one comes into play in a wide range of scenarios, whether it's drug or alcohol addiction, whether it's physical problems, physical illness. If we get COVID, you know, we have to have plans for that, especially if we have to be hospitalized. Or, and it's something to think about, our physical or mental condition is caused by burnout. I can tell you that when I burned out, there was a lot of work that had to be done to handle my clients. You can't lie about this. Rule 7.1, a lawyer shall not make a false or misleading communication about the lawyer or the lawyer's services. Taken to an extreme, that can also include, oh, there's nothing wrong with me, when you know that you're addicted, that you are exhausted, that you can't pay attention to your client's affairs. We all have coping mechanisms. We've discussed this one a little bit, where we dissociate, where we isolate, we shut down, we distract ourselves saying there's nothing wrong, and then we medicate, which is a problem in and of itself. There are positive coping mechanisms. That's where I come in. Get help. I have my company, Lawyer Lifeline, specializes in helping with lawyers who are at their last straw. You can look at gratitude exercises. You could build a team around you and ask for help. You can get exercise. You can look at nutrition, and you can look at a spiritual help such as meditation and prayer. Let me give you some tips in the last minutes that we have on how to deal with burnout. First is polyvagal exercises. For those of you who don't know what your vagus nerve is, it goes from the back of your brain all the way down to your lower extremities. It controls how you feel about things. If you're stressed out, your vagus nerve will shut down. And what you have to do is activate it. One of the easiest, I have dozens of these exercises that I teach my clients, but I want to give you one that you can use to calm down, to find some peace, to relax. You can either lie on the floor or stand up against the wall. I want you to put your arms like this to where your elbows are against the floor or against the wall. then what you have to do is, with keeping your head still, look all the way to the left at your left hand and count to 60 and breathe deeply. And then go back to the right and look at your right hand. Again, breathing deeply. And what you will feel is you will relax. It's miraculous. When I first researched this, it seemed like voodoo to me, but I can tell you that if you do this every morning when you wake up, it will make your day a lot better. Second thing is to reconnect with your tribe. Who are your friends? Who did you grow up with? Have you lost contact with them when you became an obsessed lawyer? Have you lost contact with your immediate family? I will always suggest is that you start reaching out and remembering your roots, remembering where you came from, remembering what got you here in the first place, remembering the people that were your support mechanisms and your support network when before you became a lawyer. Third thing, I want you to take 5-minute breaks, hopefully at the top of every hour. Now, this is something that takes a little discipline because it's hard to remember when you're in the middle of something, but just stand up. If you're by yourself, just do a deep breathing exercise. Just look out the window. I think it was one of the Supreme Court justices that said looking out the window is more beneficial than 10,000 pages of research, or an hour in the library. Either one, take a break. Religions have structured periods of relaxation, whether it's the monastic prayers, singing, meditation, whether it's the Muslim 5 prayers every day, or whether it's other religious exercises where you take time out regularly during the day at the same time every day. And that's what I'm recommending, that you don't have to do it for a long period of time. Just do it for a couple of minutes every hour and see if that doesn't reduce the stress. There's a breathing exercise that's fairly popular. Just breathe in to the count of 4, hold your breath to the count of 4, exhale to the count of 4, hold your breath, and then for 4, and then repeat that. 4 in, 4 out. What this does is it reduces the amount of fight or flight. When we don't breathe properly, when we're faced with a threat of danger, what happens? We instinctively hold our breath. What that does is it shuts down our frontal cortex and activates our reptilian brain. And that is our fight, flight, or freeze response, which is counterproductive to what we do as lawyers. Breathing increases the oxygen level of our brain. It allows our frontal cortex to work. We can resolve the fight, flight, or freeze and get back into the game. But we have to do this regularly. I mean, every minute that you can do it, because the more oxygen you can get to the brain, the more rational you can be. Another one is to touch your lips. What happens when you touch your lips is that produces a tactile response that brings you out of whatever circumstance you are in the moment. If you're in a heated debate and you're losing track of what's going on, or if you're in an argument with your spouse or your significant other or your children or your friends or your partners, and you're losing your mind, touch your lips. That will get you back into your body, as they say, and it will allow you to calm down. Health, that's the first thing that goes when you're headed down the slide for life to burnout. Go make sure you're getting proper nutrition, make sure you're getting exercise of some sort. Go get your blood tested to make sure that your endocrine levels are appropriate. I was shocked when I found out that I had hardly zero testosterone in my body. I had burned out my adrenal glands and was producing almost no testosterone at all. And when I started addressing that problem, I started feeling a lot better. We all know about meditation. Again, whether you're doing 5-minute meditations every hour or a half hour several times a day or any amount of time, it's good to turn your brain off for a little while and just let it free associate. Don't worry about what's right in front of you. Just turn your brain off for a minute so that it can regroup and reboot. One thing I found with very busy lawyers is that they really know, they have a calendar and they know what's coming up, but they don't make any personal plans. They don't make any personal goals. And so what they need to do is make personal goals to make sure you're not losing contact with your personal life. Again, that's one of the symptoms of burnout, is that you totally forget about your relationships, your personal life, your personal health, because you're so myopic about being a good lawyer. I recommend to my clients that they resolve 3 issues a week. That is, whatever issue it is, whether it's your grass needs cutting, or you haven't talked to somebody in a long time, or you owe somebody an apology, or there's somebody that you haven't seen in a while, or you've had an argument with somebody that's unresolved. You know what's going on in your life. Just pick 3 every week and resolve them. Come to an understanding, whether it means saying I'm sorry or whether it means doing what has to be done. But reach out to that person, that thing, that client, whatever, and make it right. Quotes and jokes are what I mean by that is find something funny every day. Find motivational quotes. It's real easy. Type Google inspirational quotes or Google jokes and read something every day. Find something happy or funny every day. And if you have to, more than once a day, because I find that what your mind focuses on becomes your reality. And I get into more of that when I help you. But the fact is like I said, change your mind. Negative thinking creates negative chemicals in your brain. Positive thinking creates positive chemicals in your brain. If you're thinking about funny stuff, life is much more fun. If you're always thinking about negative stuff, that's when that adrenaline cortisol addiction kicks in and your body health goes south. I always recommend that we have at least one happy thought that we focus on all day long. It doesn't have to be the same thought. Any happy thought would be, or, I recommend sometimes to clients that they put a sticky note on their mirror when they go look at themselves first thing in the morning that cheers them up. It could be, you good looking devil, don't you ever die. It could be, I am the best me that has ever been on this planet. I could give you hundreds of happy thoughts that you could think about. In a lot of circles, they're called mantras, but it's vitally important that we focus on what is healthy and happy. Okay, I know I have talked nonstop with few breaths for the last 50 minutes. Are there any questions? Lisa or Michelle?
Great. Excuse me. I don't see any questions in the chat or the
Okay.
Q&A. This would be the time if any of our participants. We have one comment. I don't have any, but thank you so much for your help. So now is the time if anybody wants to add anything else or have any questions for Gray, please go ahead and add them to the chat or Q&A.
Well, barring any questions, I would like to convey an offer to the lawyers listening. If you do have problems, if you are facing some of the symptoms of trauma exposure syndrome, or if you're unhappy and you don't know what to do about it, or if you're facing burnout and don't know what to do about it, send me an email at gray@lawyerlifeline.net. And that will give you two things. One is a free copy of my book, How Big Is Your Butt, which was an award-winning book when I wrote it some time ago, back in 2016, I think. And I will also give you a free consultation and recommendation of how to handle what's going on in your life. I have a variety of programs for people. Some are very short, painless, some are more comprehensive and life-changing. You don't have to do this alone, and you don't have to white knuckle it. I hope that if any of you out there are thinking about quitting, please send me an email and let's talk about it, because I don't want anybody to go through what I went through. It sucks. And I want everybody to realize their full potential, be happy, and healthy and rich. And you can do that if you know how. Unfortunately, they don't teach us much of this stuff in law school. And that's one reason why I've become a full-time coach, trainer, and confidant to help lawyers especially get their feet back on the ground. I can tell you that I have done this with doctors. I've done it with bankers. So it's not just for lawyers, but it is helpful for everyone that faces stress every day.
Gray, we had somebody in the chat room. Can you just give us a quick overview of LAP, the NC LAP program for our attendees?
Sure. Probably 30 years ago, the North Carolina Bar Association recognized a need for help for lawyers who are experiencing a wide range of mental and emotional and physical problems. The principal topic was addiction, whether it's alcohol or drug abuse. And it gives lawyers a confidential way of dealing with their problems. And if you avail yourself of the programs that LAP has or can recommend, then you can avoid disciplinary procedures unless you've done something that is not related to addiction. But if your partners or your clients report to the Bar Association that you've got a drinking problem or some kind of health or mental health problem or something, you need help, the LAP will reach out, or you can go to the LAP on a confidential basis and get help. I was involved in that for a number of years back in 1990s and early 2000. And I can tell you they do great work and can save your career and your relationships.
Great. The other comments that we have are thanks. This was informative. People greatly enjoyed it. So we certainly appreciate you being with us today. We only have a few more minutes, so if there's any other comments that any of our participants want to make, this is the time. If not, Gray has shared his email. Everybody's welcome either to reach out to Michelle or I. We also have his contact information, or if you would like any of the information from NC Lab.
Well, I would like to add this, that, burnout is survivable and it is treatable and it is healable. I'm happy to report that in 2017, I took the Oregon State Bar exam and passed it without any study. So I guess I must have remembered something. But the thing is that if you go through at least the programs I offer, it is a way that you can learn how to successfully deal with the pressures and anxieties that are typical in the practice of law. I mean, whenever you're in an adversarial system, you're going to have stress and anxiety that's normal. How you react to that can be positive and healthy, or it can be destructive internally. And so you don't have to do this by yourself. And so please get help either with the LAP, or give me an email, or find somebody who you trust to talk to.
Great. We did have 2 questions come in before we conclude today.
Okay.
The first one is it polyvagal? Did you say 16 or 60?
60.
60, so 1
seconds.
minute.
Yep.
And then the second question is, I came into the profession in the 1980s, at which time there was a discussion going on about law as a profession versus business. Any comments on that?
Well, I think that's what we all head into when we start practicing law, in that the practice of law, unfortunately, includes the business of practicing law. And what happens is the altruistic notions that we have when we graduate from law school, that we're going to save the world, we're going to help the world, runs into billing and paying the bills and staying up late at night, which we're not prepared for. We hear comments about the fact the law being a jealous mistress, but we really don't know how to deal with that. And so I'm not familiar with what, if anything, has happened in North Carolina, but I do know that there are many lawyers who are burning out because of more the business of law than necessarily the practice of law, because we all enjoy dealing with clients, most clients, and we all enjoy accomplishing things for our clients. What is hard is asking them to pay us and making enough money to pay the bills, where I think a lot of the stress comes from. I hope that answers your question.
And thank you, Gray. I have not seen any other information come in, either in the chat room or Q&A. So if you want to make your closing comments, and we're right at 12:59, I will go ahead and end this seminar, and greatly appreciate you being here with us today, and greatly appreciate the large crowd we had in the virtual audience.
Well, I just hope they learn something, and or at least know that there are solutions.
Thank you. A great takeaway. And thank you all. I am going to end this seminar. Thank you, Gray. Bye-bye.